Bible, the first chapter. Now in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces, in those days when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the capital, in the third year of his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants, the army of Persia and Media, and the nobles and governors of the provinces were before him. While he showed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days, on 80 days. And when these days were completed, the king gave for all the people present in Susa, the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rods and marble pillars, and also couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of a porphyry marble mother of pearl and precious stones. Drinks were served in golden vessels of a different kinds, and the royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king, and drinking was according to this edict. There is no compulsion, for the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. Queen Vasti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the seventh day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Nehman, Distam, Arbona, Bikta, Abakta, Jator, and Karkas, the seven anchors who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vasti before the king with a royal crown, in order to show the peoples and the princess her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. But Queen Vasti refused to come at the king's command delivered by the angels. At this, the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him. Then the king said to the wise men who know the times, for this was the king's procedure toward all the who were versed in law and judged. The man next to him being Karsena, Setar, Admata, Tarshish, Meris, Marsena, and Memucan, and the seven princes of Asia and Media, who saw the king's face and sat first in the kingdom, according to the law, what is to be done to Queen Vasti, because she has not performed the command of King Ahasuerus delivered by the unjust. Then Memucan said in the presence of the king and the officials, not only against the king as Queen Vasti done wrong, but also against all the officials and all the peoples who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, where the queen's behavior will be made known to all women, causing them to look at their husbands with contempt. Since they will say King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vasti to be brought before him, and she did not come. This very day, the noble women of Persia, Media, who have heard all the king's behavior, will say the same to all the king's officials, and there will be contempt and wrath in plenty. If it please, if it if it please the king, let a royal order go out from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and Medians, so that it may not be replaced, that Vasti is never again to come before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give a royal position to another who is better than she. So when the decree made by the king is proclaimed throughout all his kingdom, for it is a vast, all women will give honor to their husbands, high and low. Like this advice pleased the king and the princess, and the king did as Nehemon proposed. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to every province in its own script, and to every people in its own language, that every man be master in his own household and speak according to the language of his people. Yeah, reading next Esther chapter 2. After these things, when the anger of a King Ahasuerus had abated, he remembered Vasti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's young man who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem in Susa, the capital, under custody of a Igai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of women. Let their cosmetics to be given them, and let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vasti." This pleased the king, and he did so. Now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Simei, son of Kish and Benjamin, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives carried away with king of Judah and Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. He was bringing up others, that is Esther, woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in Susa, the citadel in custody of Agai, Esther also was taken into the king's palace and put in custody of Agai, who had charge of the women, and the young women pleased him and won his favor, and he quickly provided her with her cosmetics and her portion of food, and with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, and advanced her and her young women to the best place in the harem. Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. And every day Mordecai walked in front of court of the harem to learn how Esther was and was what was happening to her. Now, when the turn came for each young woman to go to the king's Ahasuerus, after being 12 months under the regulations for the women, since this was the regular period of their beautifying, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with spices and moments for ointments for women. When the young woman went into the king's in this way, she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening, she would go in, and in the morning, she would return to the second harem in custody of a Shashgaz, the king's eunuch who was in the charge of them. She would not go into the king's again, unless the king delighted in her and she was summoned by name. When the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abiel, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her his own daughter to go into the king, she asked for nothing except what Agai, the king's eunuch, who had charge of women, advised. Now Esther was winning favor in the eyes of all who saw her. And when Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace, in the when Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into is a royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebet in the seventh year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the men, and she won grace and favor in his sight. Then all the virgins saw that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vasti. Then the king gave a great feast for all his officials and servants. It was Esther's feast. He also granted a remission of a taxes to the provinces and gave gifts with royal generosity. So now, when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not made known her kindred or her people, as Mordecai had commanded her. For Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teres, two of the king's sons who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther. And Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of a king.